Welcome to the Hammy Show. I'm your host, Hammy Culpepper. I have two very, very special guests with me today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It is maybe the greatest family in Bulldog history, the Stinchcombs, Matt and Jon Stinchcomb. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us, Hammy.
Yeah, that's some high praise, pal.
I mean, hey, y'all are two damn good dogs, so I got to give respect where respect is due. But I want to start it off with a little background on both of y'all. So can you go into a little bit about y'all's early life, growing up as brothers, high school football, and then we'll pause right there before we get into the Georgia stuff.
Go ahead, Jon.
Well, I grew up in the shadow of Stone Mountain. I went to Smoke Rise Elementary School, moved down the road 3 miles, and went to high school at Parkview. Matt was a senior my freshman year at Parkview. And, at the time, Matt was already a blue chipper, 5-star recruit. And I remember my first camp as a freshman. There was some chatter like, oh, we want to see the brothers go up against each other. And at the time, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were at max high school capacity weight-wise at 310, 315, maybe? And
it was good weight, though. Really good weight.
Solid, really solid. Mm-hmm. But I'm 210, 215 tops, and it was a quick lesson of, I think we've seen enough of that we could move on. So it was not the entertainment that I think folks were expecting at the first few days of camp.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I know, Jon, you're the little brother, but y'all are competitive on the football field. But was it competitive at home? Were y'all fighters? Were y'all kind of butting heads all the time?
Thankfully, I was protected by Mom, who would never let Matt hit me back. I think. I was probably an annoying little brother, and because Matt was always far bigger, I think he was always told hey, you can't hit your younger brother, your much littler brother coming up. And where were we, Matt? In the condos where I threw a rubber wrestler across the room. That's one of the few times that I saw, there was fury in his eyes. So we didn't fight a whole lot. It wasn't very competitive.
That's hard to believe because y'all are bosses on the football field.
I'd like to correct one thing. He did not throw the rubber wrestler. He had it in his hand and used it as a weapon to smack me right. And this was the WWF replica rubber wrestlers, and those things were heavy. I mean, I bet that thing weighed 2 pounds probably. And smoked me right across the face. I remember that one vividly. But Jon's being generous because there's countless times where I would completely hang him out to dry. We lived in this condominium development there in Tucker, and the lady that lived on the corner had this unnecessarily vicious dog. What was the name of that dog? Fiskane, something, some kind of some weird, angry German sounding name. And what was that dog? Like a husky or something?
It's like a husky mix.
Yeah, like a husky Rottweiler, dog from straight out of hell. And the ball, we'd have a basketball or a soccer ball roll in there, and I'm gonna say we, because our cousin lived in there with us, and we sent Jon in there for the ball. He throws the ball out. We get the ball, we move on. Meanwhile, he's cornered in their yard by this idiot dog. And we did not rescue him. In fact, to this moment, I don't know how you got out of there. Did Helen come out and
Helen? All I remember is running for my life.
Yeah,
I gotta survive.
We didn't care enough to even turn around. Just, hey, thanks for the ball. It sucks to be you. But he clearly made it, so it was probably helped with your agility.
Yeah, you're a better man for it, for sure. So I want to talk a little bit about y'all's recruiting processes. We'll start with you, Matt. What was kind of that process like coming out of Parkview, and what were did the decision kind of come down to for you?
It was a fun process. I could remember going with Brett Conway, who was our kicker at Parkview. I think he kicked maybe the longest field goal in state history at that point in time. He ended up going to Penn State because they actually offered him a scholarship, and Georgia did not. But he took a bunch of visits, and I would tag along on his visits, and then would go to games. That was actually we'd never been to a Georgia football game until I started getting recruited. We never went as fans. Not that we weren't fans, but we just, we didn't have tickets and didn't really know anybody with tickets. I got that right, John? I mean, we never went to any.
Yeah, I don't
can't
remember
think
going.
of ever going. And so that was the first time going, and that was a ton of fun. And I had great hosts and hostesses, just really good people, and we went often enough to where you got to know them pretty well. And it was a blast. And all the unofficial visits that I would take to other schools, which I always thought was kind of curious that they seemingly never caught on to this. The other school would be playing Georgia that week. So really, it was an unofficial visit for an away Georgia game that happened to be at wherever, South Carolina or something. That was the first time I ever had Carolina-style barbecue with that mustard-based sauce. I can remember going through the line at that barbecue place, like Flying Pig or something, whatever it was called, and being like, this barbecue has turned. Like, I can't believe they even have this stuff out here. And I had no
That wasn't
idea.
on the cockaboose? That wasn't on the cockaboose, Matt?
I want to say that no, it wasn't on the cock. I feel like the cockaboose was still like a new deal. Like they only had like a few cars. They only had a few cabooses. And but so it wasn't there. It was at we were going through the line and just being like, God, this is I can't even believe people just slopping it on their plate like crazy. And it was yellow colored, but I'd never seen that before. Barbecue is red or brown, but it's not yellow. but that was a lot of fun. And then, I always kind of figured I would go to Georgia. There were other schools that you looked at, I think, just so that you felt like you did your due diligence, but it was not much of a race.
Gotcha. So, I mean, that kind of answers my question, but John, did you ever want to do something different than your brother, or was it kind of once he got involved in the Georgia program, were you a Bulldog through and through?
Well, as a younger brother, I didn't want to just make the same decision because it was a good fit for Matt. Now, with that said, Hamilton, is our mother told me during this recruiting process, she said, you can go see whatever school you want to go see, but I'm only going to drive you to Athens. And she meant it. So, I went to the spring game at Florida, and my stepdad drove me. I went over to Auburn, and my dad drove me. So I looked at other places just to make sure that Georgia was where I wanted to be. And I found myself, much like Matt, you compare everything back to the University of Georgia. And it became very clear that, it was the right fit for me too. And I was grateful to be there. But there was that piece inside of me that wanted to make sure, am I just doing this because, it's been such a good fit for him? I wanted to make sure it was the right decision for me. And I think things turned out pretty good. I don't have any regrets there.
Yeah, no, there's no regrets to be had for sure. So y'all both experienced coaching changes while at Georgia. I know it's kind of different. You're recruited by one guy, and by the time you finish up, it's a new guy at the helm. So what does that kind of do to a locker room? John, you can go first.
Well, it was a huge change. And from Coach Donnan, I enjoyed playing under him. He was a player-friendly coach that, is like, you take care of your business on the field, and that was the priority. And with Coach Richt, he comes in and wanted to instill discipline in the team. And we needed it, but that's a difficult change, especially I think this was after my 3 seasons of being in Athens. So it was a challenge, but you started to really recognize the value that he's bringing to the program and the steps that we make in as a team and the values that are added. And I always think back, it was my senior year. There was a group of players that were downtown and a fight broke out. And everyone's story was a little bit different. It was a night that I was 22 at the time. I could have been in that bar legally. It wasn't the night before a game or anything. It's in the off season. And everyone who was there ended up having the same punishment. And so I went and as a team leader, I thought, let me go meet with Coach Richt and kind of figure out, what's this all about? Because I put myself in that situation. If I wasn't involved in a fight, I don't want to be punished for it. And so he explained to me, he said, Jon, I met with each one of these guys, and I don't know, who was involved and who wasn't, what the story was, but I know this, that we have a standard here and that we all need to be held accountable to it. And they were all there. And so this is the decision that I made, because I think it's best for us as an organization, as a team. And I left that meeting going, like every coach I've ever played for, you may not agree with every decision they make. You won't. But if you can respect where they're coming from and the why behind it, then guys will buy in and believe. And that's what I think Coach Rick brought to the table, was a level of respect and accountability that you can stand behind and stand up for. So, it's not easy. When I played at Georgia, we had 5 offensive line coaches, and every time you have a turnover, they want to come in and do it their way. And, it's easier to loosen on the reins than tighten them up. So those reins stayed pretty tight, but, it's one of those things where you have to earn their respect and you kind of start over. But I appreciate the opportunity for having played for both.
That's awesome. Matt, what about your coaching change while you were here?
Well, we actually, in a very unofficial way, had 2 coaching changes, because we had Coach Goff my freshman year, and then we had Glenn Mason, sort of, but not really, who met with the team. There was not a love connection. And by the time I think he landed back in Lawrence, Kansas, he had decided that he did not want to coach our team anymore, which was fine by us, because we didn't.
How about
want him to
that for a
coach us
first
either.
impression? he comes, he meets with you, he's like, no, not
Nope.
that group of guys.
Yeah. And what's weird is there were guys, they were talking transfer. This is an age before transferring was really much of a thing. In fact, I can't think of a single teammate that I had that wasn't anything other than a JUCO transfer. So, but guys were talking transfer even then, because they're all recruited by the previous staff. That was a great coaching staff. Most of those coaches went on to coach either in the NFL or on national championship winning teams. There were some really, really good coaches that were let go in that change. So there was the Glenn Mason thing, dalliance, fling, we'll call it. And then we hired Coach Donnan. And, I was just a freshman, so you don't know much. And so you haven't formed a huge opinion. But, knowing Georgia and being recruited by that previous staff for several years, that was not easy. Like those coaches. And so, change is not always welcomed. And I think that, and I think we also knew that we had a pretty good team. It was just an injured team. That was a team that, if Robert Edwards doesn't break that bone in his foot versus Tennessee, if Mike doesn't break his knee at Ole Miss, we could have been, that was a special football team. But stuff happens and there's a cumulative effect. So I think a lot of guys were like, a change was made, but I don't know that we all agreed that a change was necessary. And so that makes it harder in transition too. And then the next year we weren't even bowl eligible. So that made it even more tough.
Right. Yeah. Understood for sure. So y'all had one season at Georgia together. I'm pretty sure that's right. And what was that like, just sharing the field together and kind of seeing each other grow as football players?
Well, my disappointment was that the coaching staff elected to redshirt Jon. He torn his ACL. What game was it? Versus those dirty
Seventh
South
of my
Gwinnett
senior
Comets.
year.
Yeah, filthy, dirty players for South Gwinnett. I say that only somewhat tongue in cheek because it was a total cheap shot. And so that, he was rehabbing his knee, but you were another one of those. Like Eric Zier was an early enrollee, but that was a weirdo, like foul ball type thing. Just didn't happen often. You enrolled early, and they elected to redshirt you, which ultimately was probably the best thing overall, given that you were coming off a knee, I guess, right? I mean, you could speak to that better than I, but selfishly, I was like, well, that's, there goes that opportunity, which would have been really cool. And, but it was a fun experience regardless. It lasted longer than it otherwise would have because Jon enrolled early, but, then I was done. I finished early after fall semester. And so then I left right after the football season was over, graduated in December and was out of there. So we really weren't there together even a full year, now that I think about it. So, but it was a good year. It was a fun year. I definitely enjoyed it. I wished it could have been selfishly that it would have gone differently because absent the red shirt, definitely would have played. And who knows if I hurt my when I hurt my shoulder, maybe you would have played in that spot versus who'd we have? Ole Miss, I think, was the game that I missed. But anyway, that's not how it shook out.
And
and for me, Hammy, just quickly, and Matt knows this side of the story probably makes him uncomfortable because usually it's some biting sarcasm between us, but that was arguably the most influential time in my life because of my faith and the walk that Matt was very influential in how he led. So, at the time, Matt's a future #1 draft pick. He's a returning All-American. It's 2-time All-American. I mean, he's the big man on campus, and I'm the younger brother who's up there doing rehab and spending away games in street clothes. I still get to travel, but I'm not contributing to the team. It's my redshirt season, and he would call me on Sunday mornings and be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'd be like, "Well, I'm sleeping. I'm in my dorm room." He's like, "All right, I'll be there in 15 minutes." And it became a priority for him to include me on just going to church. And at the time, it was a pastor, Kent Reynolds, was there, and he became real and personable to me. He seemed to be a buddy to my brother. And I remember the first time we went to lunch together. It's a pastor, and the whole church world was kind of scary to me. And we went to Anoko's, and we're having hibachi, and all of a sudden he cracks a joke to me about me, and I thought, oh, can he do that? And it became, he became a friend after that. Like, all right, it became real. And so even after Matt left, I still had this relationship with Kent, and I started to really grow in my faith, and it became very personal to me. And so that period of time where, Matt very easily could have prioritized worldly things or football or all these other things, his faith was important to him. And not only was it important to him that he invited me along with him in that, and it became a real turning point for me and my who I am as a dad, as a husband, as just a man. So it was a very influential time, not just because I got to spend a few months with my brother, which was awesome, but in my relationship with Jesus. So I know that's probably a direction that you didn't expect that to go, but it was a really influential time in my life.
That's unbelievable. That's awesome. So while y'all were at Georgia, y'all both had illustrious careers, great games, great experiences with those guys in the locker room. But can each of you pick out a favorite game that y'all had while y'all were playing at Georgia?
There's a bunch of them. I could think of quite a few. the overtime game in '96 versus Auburn. 4 overtimes, I think, at that point in time. That was still kind of a new rule because that was back when we thought ties were still somehow a thing. So they instituted the overtime rule, and that was a great game. That was a good memory. I want to say that same year we came back and beat Texas Tech at home after losing our first two, Southern Miss at home and then South Carolina on the road. Tough way to crank out a season, and under a new coaching staff. So we needed that one badly, and came back. Mike was our quarterback then, and we went down the field and like 2-minute drills, under a minute, I want to say, and I don't know how many catches. Corey Allen had a couple of catches. Juan Daniels had a couple of catches. Then Corey makes that catch on the goal line versus Auburn, and wrestles his way into the end zone. Corey actually made a ton of big catches. Now to think about it, I mean, we ended up beating. I know we beat Tech. Was that on the road? Maybe that was in '97 when we beat Tech. And Corey caught it in the end zone, in the corner of the end zone. And Munson thought it was Hines Ward, but it was Corey, and he fixed it later. That was a great one. I mean, there's a bunch. Beating Florida in '97 by 20, and it could have been worse. Making them play 3 different quarterbacks, 4 picks. That was a lot of fun. I didn't play in the one. Robert set the touchdown rushing record for the SEC in the very first game I had in '95, my freshman year, and I don't think I played. I may not have played in that game at all, but I remember that one distinctly because I thought, man, we're going to win the national championship. I mean, and he was an amazing running back. So there's a bunch that stick out.
Yeah, for me, the hobnail boot game in Tennessee, where we came back, and then the P-44 Haynes, where Neyland Stadium with 100,000+ people, you couldn't hear yourself think, much less the quarterback or anything, and the field was reverberating. And then for it to be quiet, except for one section of the stadium, which was still red and black, that was pretty awesome. The SEC championship, first one in 20 years, where we just smoked Arkansas, and then the Sugar Bowl, where it was Florida State. Those were 2 really great games. One of my early experiences was my redshirt year when we went to LSU, and it was Kevin Falk and Booger McFarland, and just that atmosphere of like the first time big SEC school. It's a full dome where all you see is sky. They're rocking your bus on the way there, and you're going, we are not playing high school football anymore. That was a neat experience early on. So, as you play, there's so many great games that bring back great memories. Those are a few for me that stand out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those were all great games for sure. So I know during y'all's time, y'all had the Baileys, and y'all were the next, or I guess the brothers at the same time as them. So who is the better football family? I'm kind of calling y'all out to see if y'all will say it. But who is the better football family between the Baileys and the Stinchcombs?
The Baileys.
Baileys.
I mean,
that was pretty easy.
It's not even a thing. I mean, you're talking about, and beyond that, they could win in quality and quantity because Ronald was there when I got there. Heck of a player. And then Champ came my sophomore year, Champ's first year, and on a team that was really talented. So you think about in that class, I want to say there's Marcus Stroud, Sports Illustrated cover boy, heck of a football player, Richard Seymour, future football Hall of Famer, Robert Edwards and Hines Ward, and the Corey Allens and Mike Bobo, and Kirby Smart. It was all conference safety. I mean, it wasn't like we had players. We had a lot of guys that I think 3 of those guys on that offensive line, 4 of those guys on that offensive line all played in the NFL. It was a really talented team, and Champ was better than all of them. And I defy anybody to find a better football player. And even to this day, where it'd be like, there's not, you could put him at almost any position. So you could probably just have a champ, and he's good enough to not even have any siblings. And then you've got Boss, just a remarkable talent. So anyway, yeah, I think John probably agrees, but that's not even a contest.
Yeah, well, even in Hammy, in our class, I mean, my signing class, it was Terrence Edwards, younger brother of Robert Edwards, Boss Bailey, younger brother of Ronald and Champ Bailey, and then me and Matt and I think we did a decent job of getting in the way of people. But you're talking about some really high end athletes. I mean, Champ is, having played with some real studs. In my opinion, Champ was the best athlete that I was ever on the same field with. I mean, the day that he ran like a 4.2 on the track, it looked like he was just gliding. And you're going, wow, that guy there's something different about him. And then for Boss, we're getting ready for the draft, and it's our pro day. And he's like, hey, John, will you come stand beside me? And there's another guy on the other side, because he's doing his vertical jump, and it's almost 4 feet straight up in the air. And sometimes he gets a little off balance when he's that high. So you make sure that, he lands properly. I never had that issue doing a vertical jump. So you talk about guys that are really special. It's nice to have been on the same field as they were.
For sure. I mean, y'all are being humble. I know they're uber talented, but y'all were pretty talented yourselves. So you can give your credit.
No, just being honest there, Hammy. I mean, there is no, and no, John brings up a good point. And then there's the Edwards brothers.
Yeah.
And they're like 1B to the Baileys. I mean, we've had there's been some good lineage over there.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. So I'm going to kind of pit y'all against each other. Can you say who's better between both of y'all?
Matt was, yeah.
You got an awful lot of championships. You got a state championship in high school, a SEC championship, and a Super Bowl and a Pro Bowl.
The right place at the right time.
Difficult to argue with that.
Yeah, well, I can argue with that. I mean, Matt was high school All-American. How many All-Americans in college? Multiple years, all conference, first round draft pick. I mean, college football Hall of Famer, Circle of Honor. He's checked every box that you can check as a player.
All in due time. Talk about timing. Time it up right. Sneak in there with the FedEx man.
There you go. So both of y'all's number were called at the NFL draft. And I want to kind of go into the details. What was that moment like when you get the call that you're going to be a professional athlete?
Want me to answer that one?
Yeah, you got it.
That was a weird day. It was not without at that age, you don't have a good frame of reference for what the real world really is. And what I appreciated most about playing at Georgia was that I had the opportunity to choose where I was going to play, and I got to go play where I really wanted to play. And so because of that, that's I think a distinction there that's important. Maybe that's lost on anybody whose last name isn't Manning, is that you don't get to pick where you go play. And Peyton didn't either. So Eli did, but Peyton didn't. Because I doubt he would have chosen Indianapolis in the state that they were in. But I didn't want to. The Raiders they were not my number one. In fact, that was the one team that I told myself I didn't want to play for. Now, it was unfair, and it was based on all the stereotypes, right? But I thought, that's just not, I don't think I'm a good fit there. And there was I didn't interview with them. I spoke with every team, met with just about every team, but not with the Raiders. There was no interaction whatsoever. So I wasn't kind of, I was completely blindsided by that team picking me. And so it was almost a little rattling more than anything else. I mean, so it sounds ridiculous. I was blessed and I think appreciative of the opportunity to keep playing a sport for a living. But the team and that day, it was just so different because I didn't see that one coming. That one came out of left field. And who knows? Then I spent almost my entire time in the training room with like torn up stuff. So I'm sure the Raiders were like, dang, hey, the feeling's mutual, pal. Turns out you didn't want to come play for us, and we didn't want a bag of bones with shredded ligaments for 5 years. So it could have been a mutual win. It ended up being a great experience, incidentally. It was a great experience. I was really blessed by that experience. It didn't go the way I wanted, but it ended up being a good experience. But draft day was weird because of that, because it was just kind of out of left field kind of pick.
Right. John, what about for you?
Yeah, oddly similar because, we had the same agent. Well, he of the 32 teams, he gives you a list. Like, here's your top 10 most likely, really top 5. I think one of these teams, and then there's some, if the right situation is right, you could end up here. And then here's 10 teams that you don't really have to worry about. They either, we both play tackle. So in New Orleans, they had just signed Wayne Gandy to a long contract. They had 2 other vets at the other tackle spot that, it was a stocked room. So that when that pick came around, it was very unexpected. Now, I was grateful. You're about to play in the NFL, and you think, at the time, and maybe it's ego, but it's like, I'm going to revolutionize the game no matter where I go. But quickly you realize it was Darren Howard at the time, played defensive end for the Saints. Like, oh man, if I block him a couple times in a practice, I'm doing pretty good, and know that there's a jump. I got to step my game up. But that first time in New Orleans, second week I'm there, I get the grill stolen from my car. What I know about New Orleans, the place, I was thinking this is not the best fit for me. And I'm glad that I'm not in steering this ship, because it turned out awesome. I loved my time there. I love the city. I've got dear friends in the organization that will last a lifetime, and you win a Super Bowl. And there was some adversity early on that you're going, this place is the worst. And now I love it. And it's I feel like I'm a part of the fabric down there, and hopefully the feeling's mutual. But at the time, it wasn't. I'm glad I'm in the NFL, but probably would have chosen, I don't know, 28 other places to be on that list out of 32.
That's funny. So, Matt, you're in the Raiders organization when John's getting drafted. I know you probably didn't have a say, but could you at least kind of get a little motivation into the GM's head? Like, hey, my little brother, he's coming up. You wanna select him? Like, was that ever any part of it?
Nope. No, it was not.
Yeah, I mean,
no, I was just thrilled that that they would still let me in the building anymore after 3 seasons on IR or whatever it was. I was just, I was glad that I could still come in, and they would say, hey, yeah, you still got a locker. So
No,
those guys, they and plus the Raiders just did things so differently. I did have Mr. Davis was always at practice, and he was hyper aware. He obviously did things uniquely that worked for him often enough, because the Raiders were a really accomplished franchise. But he would just randomly just kind of holler out to you on the way off the practice field or something. And coming off the practice field one time, he rattled off John's statistics and tangibles, and so you thought, oh well, maybe he's he's definitely on the radar screen. He's a really good player. But that was the extent of it. And I didn't presume to make suggestions to Mr. Davis. You never know how those would be received, so you just kind of yes sir, nod your head. Charles Woodson could talk to Mr. Davis like he was a peer or something, but I did not presume to have that same that same type of standing.
For sure.
Here's what's funny. I'm at the combine in Indianapolis. I'm getting ready to run my 40. You know, everybody's like, oh man, this is an important moment. And Al Davis is in the stands, you know, kind of close to the track right there. And he's like flagging me down. And I'm getting ready to line up, you know, get my blocks. And I'm kind of like giving him a hello, Mr. Davis. He's like, your brother's on my team. Your brother's on my team. I'm like, yes, sir. I'm aware.
I noticed.
I'm aware. Yeah. I did know that he plays for you.
Oh, that's so funny.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
So Jon,
I know that. I knew that he rehabs for you.
Yeah.
He's out there rehabbing for you right now.
So I mean, I'll go ahead and visit the injury. So like, I mean, Matt, you had a tough go with the injuries, and I mean that it shortened your career. But what kind of got you through getting through those injuries throughout your career?
Well, yeah, I will say I was blessed for a long time where I was never injured. I didn't miss any high school games. I didn't miss any college games until my senior year, and then it was just the one game. Probably should have been more, but was just the one game. And so, in that regard, and I think that's huge for most players. There's so many great players that never got to, I think, their potential or demonstrate just how great they were just because they got derailed by injury. And there's a ton. I mean, there was some at Georgia where you're going, God, we will have never seen how great you would have been had you not trashed both your knees. And we're still good players, but you just, I think back to like Derek Bird, and Bird still started for us and was a heck of a player and a great teammate. But that dude in high school was just wrecking shop. And you just think this, and then, his knees quit on him. And so I felt blessed to have been as healthy as I was for as long as I was. But a couple of things. One would be my faith. It was a great opportunity to grow faith, especially my rookie year in Oakland. Because once you're injured in the NFL, it's you're a part of the team, and it's hey, how you doing? But the show must go on, and those guys are still trying to play and win games, et cetera. But that's kind of it was a jarring experience for me anyway, because I wasn't used to being on the shelf. And so it was just a really quiet time. And you're 2,000 miles away from everybody that really. And this is pre-cell phones and all the things. So there's not a lot of distractions. So it gets really quiet really quickly. So I would say that. And my wife, I mean, she was especially the second really big one, the one that kind of ended it, was just she's a really strong person, and surprisingly so. You don't always see the resolve, but it's there. She's pretty steely. And so I would say those two pieces. And, thankfully, because of the first go round, and there was a couple others where, you get banged up, you can't finish the year. But then the second big one really was more manageable, I suppose, for having experienced the first one, so all things for a purpose or have a purpose. And I think the first one probably prepared me for the last one.
Right. So we'll kind of shift gears. Jon, for you get that Super Bowl ring. And is there a moment in that season or in that game specifically that y'all are like, whoa, we got this? Like, we're a really good football team, and this is our ring this year.
Yeah, well, we knew we were a pretty good team. We went 13-0 for the first 13 weeks of the season. Ended up losing the last 3 games, but at that point, who cares? We were the number 1 seed, and all the media folks are saying, "Oh, they've lost momentum, and you're not carrying it over." And then we go out there and smoke a Kurt Warner's led Arizona team, and then in the NFC Championship, we're playing against Minnesota, and in my opinion, they were the best team in the NFL that year. They were loaded. I mean, Brett Favre, this was I think it was the first year where they played the Pro Bowl in the same city the week before the Super Bowl. So I was a Pro Bowler that year, and we go in street clothes into the locker room, and half the locker room is filled with Vikings that we just beat in overtime, and they're going, we should be switching spots. There's no reason for y'all to be heading to the Super Bowl, and we're playing in this game that is meaningless in comparison. So it was a big time deal. But in that week leading into the Super Bowl, you have a bunch of speakers, guys that have been there. How do you handle the moments and all these things? And I believe it was Aeneas Williams who came and was talking to the team and was saying, you got to find a moment, some moment in the game where you take it all in, because this is a dream that most people had since they were little kids, playing in the Super Bowl, and you don't know what the outcome will be, but you soak it up that I'm living out this dream that I've had since I was playing backyard ball when I was 9 years old, and Matt and all the older kids were beating me up, and now you're actually living it out, right? So it's really cool. So we're in the fourth quarter. We're on the bench. We're up by 7. I'm sitting next to our center, Jonathan Goodwin. I tap Goody on the leg. I'm like, hey, Goody, there's 6 minutes left in the Super Bowl. We're in Miami playing against the Colts and Peyton Manning, and we're up by 7. So this was our moment to kind of take it in, not really knowing Peyton Manning and company can score in 4 seconds. So the game can just flip on its head. Well, then Tracy Porter cuts in front of a slant pass, intercepts it, takes it back to the house, and we're like, we're going to win this thing, right? So you're on the field. There's seconds left on the clock. We're in the huddle. We're like little kids, just giddy with excitement because you're living it out, right? You're like, and Goody's like, Stitch, tell it to me one more time. And like, there's 27 seconds left. It's 31-17. We're going to win the Super Bowl. So, in those moments of just pure jubilation that, something that you've dreamed about, you think there's been a lot of really, really good players play this game that have never had this opportunity. And we're about to see the ticker tape fall from the sky and hoist the Lombardi trophy and celebrate for the next 9 months, which you probably shouldn't have. It probably should have been 4 months. We had a little hangover that following season. But if New Orleans does anything right, it knows how to party, and we did that with an exceptional success for that next year. But it was one of those moments that has been very memorable, and a story that I'm grateful to be a part.
That's amazing. So, Matt, on your end, you were close to the Super Bowl. You were on that Raiders team, correct? With that played the Bucs in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So you get traded to the Bucs right after. Was there a little bit of bad blood when you go to that team and you get in that locker room and you're like, you beat me last year? Was there something that kind of was off about that situation?
Well, there's a year in between there, because we came back. This shows how quickly things can change. That year, we went 12-4, I want to say, in the regular season. And I think set offensive records. And Rich was our offensive MVP and all those things. And I share all that because the next year we went 3-13. And you just think, man, how does it change that quickly? And then I went to the Bucs as a free agent, and you're a year removed, and those guys, that team, that Super Bowl team for the Bucs had been largely dismantled. I mean, that one was a unique circumstance because Coach Gruden was traded to the Bucs. I think in the one and only time a coach has ever been traded in the NFL, because they made a rule shortly thereafter because the Raiders got draft picks and money for the head coach. And then the head coach in his first year wins a Super Bowl against his former team, the team that traded him. But by then it wasn't it was an unfortunate timing thing, that's for sure. It would have been a lot cooler if you were on the team that actually won it. Yeah. But it wasn't a big deal because a lot of those guys were gone. I mean, you get there and you're like, wow, there's just not a ton of the team that was here that won the Super Bowl. A lot of those pieces weren't there anymore. So it was just that was kind of weird.
I gotcha. So, John, for you, I mean, you're protecting an all-time legend in Drew Brees. And y'all competed for a Man of the Year award. I think you were a nomination one year, and he was been nominated as the Saints representative many years. And so what's it like kind of having that leader in the locker room? I mean, you go to war for this guy, especially for you down in the trenches.
Yeah, he still is an exceptional person, an exceptional leader, a guy that, when he first came from San Diego, you're going, what's left is there, his throwing shoulder had just exploded basically. And the Dolphins said, you know what, we'd rather go a different direction than Drew. And so, he's coming in and you're going, I don't know, is what we're going to get. Now, obviously, you look back and you go, this is historically one of the very best to ever play the game, and the way he fit in the Sean Payton system couldn't have been better, and things were great. But, early on, that first preseason, we play 4 games, and I don't think he threw a pass over 10 yards. Like when the receiver caught it, we still didn't know. And, is Drew healthy enough to be the guy? Now, spend the next 5 years with him, and you recognize that he's just different. And his commitment to his craft and being a leader, he wasn't just a quarterback. I mean, I always tell people on Thursday nights, we'd go to dinner as an offensive line, and then the quarterbacks would come with us. And if you're injured, you have to come in before your day starts. So if your first team meeting's at 8:00, you have to be there at 6:30 to get some treatment, start the day. Well, if you get there at 6:20 for that 6:30 first treatment session, there's still going to be a car in the player's lot that has been there before you get there, and that's Drew. He's already in the building. He's already doing work. And so at Thursday, if we get done at 4:30, 5:00, and we go to a 6:30 dinner, he usually would call ahead and be like, hey, just order me this. I'll be there soon. And it's not because he's rude, but he's still meeting with the coaches and game planning and preparing for the game on Sunday, when the rest of us have already left and we've gone home and we've changed clothes and we're going to dinner, and he's still up there. And I think that was the case his entire career I mean, we're year, 5 or 6 in the Sean Payton era. And I look over during training camp, and his notebook in week 2 of install, which he's installed, he could coach it down to the minute detail, but he's got a notebook that is filling up again as if it's the first time he's hearing these plays. And you're going, this is the most basic handoff to the running back, dive next to the tackle play. And he's got a page and a half of notes on it. And that's who he was all the time. So when you're around a guy like that, it's easy to believe in him and get behind him and support him. Now, what's difficult is knowing that as an offensive lineman, if you screw up, then you're letting everybody down. So, my last year of playing, things are hurting, right? Well, nobody cares. And you're going up against some of the freakiest athletes, big animals that this world could ever create. And you're going, I've got to perform, because if I screw up and I get this guy hurt, then there's going to be literally millions of people that are ticked at you, and you're going to get hate mail. So, there are certain perks to playing along with it, but it comes with a big heaping mound of pressure when you're not always feeling your best to perform.
I'm sure he is an all-time legend, and it's pretty cool that you shared a locker room with him. But we'll shift gears once again. I always do a little speed round. So how I'll do it is I'll ask a question. We'll go Matt and then John. Just the easy softballs, but what everybody I know is dying to know about the Stinchcomb brothers. So first question of the speed round: sports movie.
Bull Durham.
Bull Durham. All right, John.
Kingpin.
Love it. All right, favorite food.
Fried shrimp.
Such a good one. I'm going to say biscuits and gravy.
Ooh, I like it.
That's two things.
Oh, it's one dish.
One dish. There you go. That's the key. All right. One sport to play for either one of y'all that isn't football, if you could go pro in it.
Baseball.
Soccer.
Wow. All right. All right. And then if you could, this one's a little tougher, a favorite quote that you've lived by, taken through your careers and now after football as well.
Mark 5:36 is don't be afraid, just believe.
Well done. I was thinking Dad used to say, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right.
There you go. Well, that concludes our speed round. Thank you for participating. That was good stuff. Thank y'all. So now off the field, since your football careers have come to an end, y'all have enjoyed it, many different endeavors, but one thing y'all are heavily involved in is philanthropic events off the field. One that I read about was the event, the Countdown to Kickoff, that y'all host with David Green. Can y'all just give me a little bit of details on that event and what all it is and what all y'all do in it?
Yeah,
You
that was
change
a
that
great
is
event.
to a was.
Yeah,
It's a was,
we did
okay.
that. Yeah, we did that event for a decade and a half, I want to say. And thankfully, we had great sponsors for throughout those years, and a lot of former teammates that helped support that. The Georgia fan base being as enthusiastic as it is, it wasn't that challenging, and impacted some really important charities: Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Children's Tumor Foundation, the Georgia Pediatric Exercise and Motor Development Clinic, which is forever the clunkiest and most challenging name for a nonprofit ever. But nonetheless, the College of Education has a graduate assistantship because of that event. And so we're really, really grateful for it. And it's, and we just, I want to say,
And the
was it
Georgia
3 years
Transplant
ago?
Foundation.
Yeah, did I leave them out? My goodness. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Georgia Transplant Foundation, the Second Chance program for kids that get transplants there at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta hospitals. So that was just an amazing experience for both of us, and I'll speak for Greeny too. DJ Shockley was a big supporter of it. A lot of guys. I shouldn't even go into the list because the list is incredibly long. But that was important. It remains, those causes remain important to us. But also, we felt like at some point it was time to refocus energies and support towards other existing fundraisers and efforts, and afford there's other players that have come through Georgia that are very community minded, and so how can we support those initiatives, and have been able to do so. So it was a fantastic vehicle, I think, for former players to participate and give back. And now we're really grateful that we can support the efforts of others with our foundation and with some of the momentum, I think, that was created by that Countdown to Kickoff family of events.
That's awesome. So John, I know I met you for the first time at Coach Rick's Dog Bowl, and it was an awesome event that raised a lot of money for Parkinson's and Crohn's disease. Can you talk a little bit about just that experience, what Coach Rick means to you, as well as his disease and his battle, and how he's kind of changed in the whole game in it?
Well, I think anyone who's had the great opportunity of spending time with him, either as a player or just around him, uh, his authenticity is noteworthy. And uh, even when he was a coach and I was the player, and since our dynamics have changed, I'm no longer 19 years old and he's my coach, but there is a respect there that defies any of those relationships. And what you witness, and we saw it this past weekend when he was recognized at the Georgia Florida game as a Hall of Fame inductee. And usually there's two representatives from Georgia, two from Florida, and half the team claps, and you might get a couple of boos from the other ones, right? Different for Coach Rick than any player I've ever seen, because both sides were cheering for him. And I think that not only speaks to, yes, he was a phenomenal coach, and sometimes that gets glossed over by the line that follows, is he's an incredible man. In his authenticity to who he is and whose he is, bleeds through in everything. So what we saw when we were at the Dog Bowl is a number of people that recognize he is constantly trying to serve others. And even in this fundraiser, it was made about what can the benefits can be for others that suffer from Crohn's and Parkinson's, and less about, hey, because of me, I want you to do this for me. It was never about him. And that's the only way I've ever known him to be. It's always a selfless service for others. And so to be a part of that and to support that, it's similar to what Matt was saying of how we've transitioned our philanthropic efforts is to promote and support others that are doing some really awesome things. We feel like to whom much is given, much is expected, and we've been blessed abundantly. It's given us platform and abilities to support in ways that is a blessing. It's a blessing to be a blessing, and being a part of that Dog Bowl is just another example of it. And it's because of guys like Coach Rick and their leadership that it kind of perpetuates itself. Others say, hey, I can be a part of it. I can do that. And, it's a great witness to all those that are around him.
Yes, sir. That's awesome. So I'll wrap it up quick. Thank you all for staying on so long. Sorry to keep you. I know you're busy, but I always close out with these two questions. So if each of y'all could answer, what makes Athens such a special place and a special place for the University of Georgia to be?
Go ahead.
It's a fun place. One, it's small. It's its own city, right? So there's plenty of great restaurants. It's a beautiful campus. The people are awesome. And when I was a student there, it was second to none experientially. And the same holds true. Different kind of experience as an adult and as a fan, but just a great place. The design of the campus, the fan base, what it has to offer, the restaurants. It's one of the best college towns of all those that I've been to. The way it's set up, the way it's executed, the way it supports itself and those around it. It's an awesome environment. What did I leave for you, Matt? Any meat left on the bone there?
Yeah, I was about to say. I mean, I would probably say the bus system. I think that's what makes it so great. It's the busing system. It's like going to school in a postcard or on a movie set. Like if you could build the quintessential Southern college town, folks will make an argument for Oxford, but until they start, winning on the level that Georgia is, they will always be missing that component. Georgia's got that piece. It's like all the elements that you would want in a college town. If you'd never experienced it, I think you would send folks to Athens, Georgia, and that's not lost. And they're always like the number one college town in the country. And if they aren't, you're going, well, who screwed this list up? Because it should be sitting at number one only because it is. And that's not even as a Georgia person. That's, I've been to a bunch of other campuses. There's some great campuses in the Southeastern Conference and beyond. But none of them are better than Athens and UGA. It's pretty unique in that way.
Oh yeah, for
now
sure.
They just got to get a varsity in town. I mean, it's just that's still I can't quite. It's hard. That's a hard thing to drive by. I get it. There's real estate opportunity and blah blah blah. But by golly, the Gastro Olympics having moved out of town that's always going to be tough.
I know it is tough. I live right next to the varsity. It's right out this window. I can see it from here. But I do miss the varsity, but I've had a pretty good run myself while I'm in college. I do like to brag that I've maybe had one of the best college tenures in Georgia history. But
yeah.
But
you got to get a graduate degree out of you, pal.
I know.
We're gonna have you stick around.
I think I'm a good luck charm. I don't know. I don't want to brag or anything. I'm just kidding. But so finally, to close it out, I always ask this question: what are y'all's expectations for the rest of this 2023 Georgia football season?
Matt?
A conference championship, and I would think a national title. That would be I mean, look, I'm a fan. I'm not a player or a coach, so I don't have to be bridled by anything. And there's nothing that says that both of those aren't readily accomplished. It can be readily accomplished. I'm not going to say it's easy by any stretch, but that's the program that Georgia has now. Is that those expectations? If they don't get there, is it disappointing? Sure. Is it crushing? No, or any of those things. But that I think that's where the standard has now been set. Win 2 in a row, and with a team like this one, 3 in a row is very doable.
Yeah, I think that's realistic, right? I mean, let's talk reality, not just bias. Realistically, Georgia has a shot at a third national championship. I don't think they're quite as elite as they have been, especially defense over the past couple of years. And I don't think they need to be. I mean, are there teams that can beat Georgia? Yes, there are. But I wouldn't trade places with any of them. I wouldn't trade places with Ohio State or Michigan or Florida State. There is not a team out there that I would say, I think that realistically they've got a better shot than Georgia does to win a national championship. And, you can call me biased. I'm sure I am. But that's how I see it. I think realistically, this team has a shot at winning yet another national championship.
Yeah. What's different, I think, real quick, is that it sounds like that's putting pressure on those guys. No, they've earned that expectation by the way they've played. They've earned the expectation that you're a championship football team. And it's not a hope. And it's not a speculation. It's, look, we've all got eyeballs. You all have earned the right, the honor to be expected to win championships. It's unreasonable. It would be unfair or pressure to say that of a lot of other programs. No, we expect you to win championships. Come on, what informs that? But here at Georgia, what they have earned is the expectation that you're a championship football team. And I think it's more of an honor based on what they've done than it is a burden.
I completely agree. I think if there's one team to do it in this year of college football, it's us. So it is a pretty special time to be here at the University of Georgia, but it's even more special to get to interview you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. And that's a wrap for the Hammy Show. Thank you.